it seems to me, number of learned professions in the white-haired parts of the cohorts. There are more lawyers and doctors and professors and school teachers and former clergy who have left the profession than there are just grocers or whatever. And that interests me also, that kind of skewing to the upper part of our trained professions seems to be present and informing that. So, but having said that, the traditionalists really are those people, and my heart kind of bleeds for them too sometimes. These are the folk in your parish who just honestly don't want it changed, who just don't want it changed. A few funerals is going to take care of it, and that's just the truth, because it is an age thing by and large. But it's the guy who says with great sincerity, my daddy paid for that organ, and by God, it's going to play when you bury me. You know, and he means it. He means it. It's not like the corners where it's a God vocation, where it's a real, I've got to aggressively go fight this thing because God told me. It's a, just don't mess with me. Just don't mess with me. I like it the way it is. I've done it this way all my life. Let me get out of here before you change it, kind of thing. I was talking to this dear young priest the other day, 3 weeks ago now, and he said something I'd never heard a priest say before. I can't remember where he was, Texas, I think, who said, what he said is, they drive me freaking crazy. They drive me freaking crazy, but I find myself asking one or two of them to lunch almost every week. And I said, why? And he said, because they always tell me something I didn't know. You know, something about the building, something about the history of the parish, something about the liturgy. He said every once in a while, and he was not a graduate from here, he's BTS, but he said, well, maybe that explains it. No. He said, you know, the things I didn't learn about the liturgy. And I can go back and look them up, and usually they're right. And he said, so I've got this tension and relationship here. But it is true. Funerals are probably going to take care. And I suspect that they're no more than about 5%, if they're that much right now. But they're there. The retraditionalists are the people whom, this too is a neologism, and it's invented by Diana Butler Bass. And I hope all of you know Diana Butler Bass's work. If you don't, please, and there is a bibliography, I think, in your pack, but please make a note also in your notes to look at Diana Butler Bass's work. Practicing Christianity for the rest of us. And let me sidebar right here and say that, having nothing to do with this, but with Diana, Diana has just released this month, February, this month, a book called The People's History of Christianity, which is it is the first attempt, I know, by a beautifully credentialed scholar to take church history and talk and just tell it. Just tell it like a story. And it's a wonderful book it will be a wonderful book for small group or for group study, because it's very accessible. It's just how it was, boys and girls. You know, it's not theological. It's just the history of how we got from there to here. And it's because she is very gifted as a scholar. She's very gifted in being able to just talk to people. And she got a grant from the Lilly Foundation about 5 years ago now to study Christianity, to study parishes, to study what's going on. And one of the things she discovered was that one of the two areas of growth, and this is one of them, you'll be interested though, and this is the other. One of the two areas of growth is in the retraditionaling circle. And she invented the word to separate it from traditionalists and from progressives. And just as there is an age factor in the traditionalists, there is also an age factor here, and I'll bet every one of you has noticed it. The growth here is in young couples coming back to church with their children. That's always been a phenomenon of some, the old thing was you go to college, you quit going to church, you get married, you stay in bed, and then you have kids because you stayed in bed, and then you have to go to church again. And, you know, I mean, it's just how the old joke used to be. This time, it's not that we are bringing the kids back for 6 or 8 years so we can get them indoctrinated in the general Christianized culture. That's not it at all. It is we are bringing them back because we want to be more Presbyterian than John Calvin was, or more Anglican than Hooker was, or more Baptist than Smith and Helwys were, or more Methodist than poor old John and Charles ever hoped to be. It is, there was value in the story, and the story is going to be denominational, and we want it in every way celebrated. This is your folk who truly want the pageantry in our tradition as Episcopalians, who don't think that funny cone and that gold ring and that purple shirt and all of those skirts are in any way amusing. What they see is the glory of Queen Bess. It is the goriness of Henry VIII. It is the Elizabethan settlement. It is all those things that made us, so that this precious thing that we hold, these prayers we say, are sacramentalized and memorialized and relived in the reliving of the pageantry that we go through when we worship. It's that kind of re-embracing with real joy, with real depth. I don't care what kind of parish you're in. These people don't require a different church. They want you to clean up the one you got, you know. They don't want a different building. They would just like one more stained glass window. They don't want to dance in your nave aisles. They would like 2 boxes instead of 1, you know. Well, maybe. 1 anyway. 1 good one, okay? This is where a great deal of the energy is. It's true in Roman Catholicism. It's true in Methodism. It's true in Presbyterianism. Doesn't matter where you are, because each one of these quadrants has a circle. Now, I hope you will read Diana's work, or have her here maybe to Seabury to speak or something. I don't know. I hope you will be familiar with her. But whatever you do and however you go at it, be aware, if it's easier, that 2 or 3 of the congregations she studied in practicing congregations and in Christianity for the rest of us were Anglican. St. Gregory's, Holy Communion in Memphis, Tennessee, and St. Stephen's in Richmond were the 2 that she took. You might want to look. St. Stephen's, where the rector now is Gary Jones. St. Stephen's is a wonderful example of this. I have forgotten, and I don't want to exaggerate or lie. He's right at the verge of being a mega church. And there are not many mega churches. Mega church will fit anywhere. Mega church is a description, or is a descriptor by size and membership. It is not a theological description. You can have mega churches that are Emergence and mega churches that are the most completely conservative ones in the world. It doesn't. But he's right at, and generally the break is above 5,000. And St. Stephen's in Richmond is right at that. Now, you know, the whole notion of, and it has grown from about 1700, I think, when he went there 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I guess it is. I hope I'm right. I'm fudging some factors maybe. But that, so that it has grown that. Why? Because he's a retraditionaling priest. One of the reasons that Holy Communion also showed up in Butler Bass's original work in Memphis was Gary Jones was there. And he built it as a retraditionaling congregation or parish before he came here and did this thing. This is not an ode to Gary Jones, by the way. He happens to be a friend, but this is based on Butler Bass's work. How does he do it? Well, he does a Celtic Mass once a week. Well, he does evensong. Now, there's an impractical thing to do, right? You know, you're going to do evensong every night? You got to be kidding, Father. But people will come, you know. He absolutely, every linen that can be there is there. Every piece of garb that was ever invented will be hanging on somebody's body in procession every Sunday, you know? And you don't want to be part of his altar guild. It will drive you freaking crazy. You know, his sacristy is bigger than this room because it takes it. But that's what's happening. And why are they coming? And you stand in his nave and you look. And it's not his nave, obviously. He was called by St. Stephen's because they also were of the same persuasion. So, you know, let's be honest. But what we've got here is a group of people, is a parish, is a vestry and a priest and an enabling bishop who are absolutely recreating the wonder of the tradition and saying to their people, come and let us form each other within the beauty of this thing. They are not that far from orthonomy. They really aren't. And it will work. I don't care. And because you don't have to lose your building, you just have to fix it up. And because you don't have to lose your vestments, you just have to add to them. It will work. The problem is, and I've been fascinated by this, and visiting Anglican communions around the country, or Episcopal communions around the country, been interested in the fact that how the first struggle is toward that evensong. And it's hard to get people. You usually have to commandeer your vestry, and you vestries who are here right now don't want to hear this, but you used to have to commandeer your vestry to come lead it. And it usually apparently works better if you do it on Friday night or something. And you do it by yourself, essentially. There'll be nobody there at first. And it'll take a while. If you're smart, you'll announce it on the net. And you will pass out an announcement by email that it's there. And then you'll get 2 or 3. And the first thing you know, you'll get 30 or 40 folk, most of whom will not be Episcopalian. Most of whom will be emergent. That's the other interesting and funny thing about it. Now, you may make some converts out of it, but they'll be there. The other thing that's happening up here, it's also happening all over the center here, and it was first called to my attention by some New England dioceses, and I hadn't realized it. Now I'm hearing it all over the country, is confession. The old business of confession is very much a part of this, as it's a part of this. The desire to confess to a priest or to an ordained person. And I said when I was here with the Diocese of Chicago that you'd be smart to, on your home page, put a place for the priest. The priest is in, or something, a tile like that, that allows folk to come in and begin a conversation, a confessional conversation with the priest. The church has not yet decided whether you can absolve on the net, and that sounds silly. Yeah, it's a chuckle, isn't it? It's a chuckle, except it is canon law that we're going to have to figure out. Can you indeed, can you do that? In the same way, does your impunity, does clerical privilege accrue when somebody comes in on the net and says, I killed my mother 3 years ago and nobody caught me? Well, what do you do with that? You're out right now, obviously, is the fact that it's probably an avatar talking to your avatar, and we're not really having a conversation, and you've got no way of knowing how to get at X. That kind of silliness won't last long. We're going to have to deal with canon law in terms of the internet, and those are real, genuine issues. But they also, my priest friends say, that usually if you get a serious confession, one who may just be confessing that he stole something, or confessing that he's not prayerful as he should be, or whatever. If you get that kind of confession, usually on a home page for a parish where the priest is the tile, you're dealing with people who are local, who are near enough so that you can eventually in the second or third encounter say, well, why don't you meet me at Starbucks? I'd like to talk to you about this in person. And at that point, old canon law ships in, and you're okay. And you also are dealing with a human being. It is the anonymity of the net, however, that is enabling confession. And it is right here. Now, having said that, as I say, I did a big deal with it, and some of you heard me, when I was here speaking to the clergy of the diocese a couple or 3 months ago. And I was met yesterday or the day before by one of your priests who said, I want you to see my tile. And he pulled out his laptop and showed it to me, and he said, nobody since November has come. Are you sure you know what you're talking about? Mea culpa, Padre. I don't know why they're not doing it. I suggested it was because the tile was about this big, and you really had to care in order to see it. But it is true that that this is bringing back some of those former sacraments and that kind of thing. All right, I'm gonna lift this up just a minute and go. I'm coming right back to it. But yesterday, when we were initiating this conversation, I said that there is a central question always, or sometimes it's our authority, that informs every single one of these. Every time we go through one of these upheavals, every time we go through one of the greats, This is always the primary question. There are either one or two, and in our case, three, in the case of the Great Emergence, questions below that. They are not less important. They're just not as consistently present. One of these, as I said yesterday, is what is the nature of humanness? What is a human being? The second one that's very much in our face is the need for a theology of religion. Where or what is our theology of religion? Well, I can't spell religion. That's a disaster in my profession. Which is to say, put simplistically, what it means is, how can I, as a devout Christian, live in a polity composed of members of other faiths that are entirely antithetical to mine and not create strife? How can I share space with those who follow a different God or a different way of getting at God? And if I'm evangelical, how can I do that when my God also says that I have an obligation to evangelize my neighbor? And yet, if I do, I create civil strife. I create hard feelings. I interrupt a relationship. How do I get around that contradiction? And the third one, which we will come back to, is the nature of the atonement or of the substitutionary death, or however you want to put it, Anselm of Canterbury's notion of what the crucifixion was all about. It probably shouldn't have happened. It is this one right here. It is the theology of religion that makes it difficult for me to do a good job about the progressives. And so this is by way of apology. This is to say that the progressives are those who are slightly nearer to the center. They are not necessarily forced to retraditionalize. They usually have the drop-down screen. They usually have in their naves or their sanctuaries or whatever you want to call it, people doing liturgical dance even as the preacher drags on. They will occasionally have artists potting over in the corner because Emergence Christianity is deeply incarnational, because Emergence Christianity wants to feel. And the nearer you get to the center, the more potter's wheels you're going to find in holy space, the more artists you're going to find drawing on the wall, the more people you're going to find who suddenly get up from the pew and go to the back and begin to animate this way or to reenact the sermon or their experience of what the sermon has been about or the conversation has been about. If you find that disconcerting, welcome to the world of the traditionalist who really doesn't want to see it happen, not in his or her name. But the progressives are incarnational in that sense. They are in every way emergent, except they're not quite there. They still hold on to a few things. And the reason they're called progressives is they are the congregations, they are the circle that are dealing with some of the heavy lifting theologically. These are the folk, and by and large, again, if you can generalize, these are the folk who are heavily trained in theology as you and I understand it. They are not sola scriptura. God knows they are a long way from sola scriptura, but they know what they're, as a rule, and I'm generalizing about hundreds and thousands of people, I understand that, but if you can generalize, then here's where there's some heavy lifting going on. Their leader, their Brian McLaurin, is a man named Eric Elnes, E-L-N-E-S. He wrote a book called The Phoenix Affirmation, which is also in your bibliography. It's about that thick, and it's about that size in trim. You can read it in 10 minutes, and it'll take you 10 years to understand what he just told you. Not because it's opaque in any way, it's very clear, but because the significance and the depth of what he just told you, it's their 95 Theses as a movement. He is pastor of a megachurch, countryside, is 17,000, I think, and growing now in Arizona. A dear friend, and he understands that I don't present well. Their major theologian is probably Hal Tussig, T-U-S-S-I-G, that I stumble here, and I wish I didn't. I wish I could do it better. But whatever else they are, They are all-inclusive. The Emergents will say they're all-inclusive too. They don't have the struggle with what that means. The progressives, yes.
Have you read the book by Delvin Brown that says what the progressives believe?
No.
It's pretty good and pretty readable.
I need to do that. Delwyn Brown, what does a progressive believe? I will.
And it gives
Why didn't Eric tell me that?
the shades of progressive. Because
There are shades there. This is the most shaded of the circles. Bless you. Delwyn Brown, what does a progressive believe? It's important to understand what this circle does because in many ways it mediates. It really is the mediating circle. Okay. Is his training. When they say they're all-inclusive, the hyphenated will say the Emergents will say they're all-inclusive, but they don't have any problem with it. This is where it's being wrestled with. This is where the actual, this is to say Christian particularity, Christian exclusivity or exclusiveness cannot happen. There is no justification for saying that there's only one way to God, and that is through Jesus Christ. Now, when you say that as an emergence, that's okay, probably. When you say it as a progressive, you say, oh, but it's also written, unless you eat of this flesh and drink of this blood, you cannot see the kingdom of God. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Scripture after scripture that creates that tension. Now, they're all inclusive in gender as well and in gender roles, and that's no problem. That doesn't seem to be, it's primarily the theology of religion, where we owe them, every Christian in this country owes the progressive movement and its thinkers a real vote of thanks because they really are doing the heavy lifting. I can't get there. The reason I stumble is that I'm just not an ecumenist or an interfaith person or whatever. It's just not in me. I believe unless you eat of this flesh and drink of this blood, you cannot see the kingdom of God. At the same time, I'm not arrogant enough to think that Jesus Christ has to look like a Nazarene, that Jesus Christ could have appeared in other places and in other particular cultural adaptations. But that's a rhetorical fix. Any way you go at it, that's a rhetorical fix. I still think it's Jesus. I'm still Jesus only. But anyway, this is what they do. Are they growing? Yes, they're active. I don't know if they're growing so much as they are vigorous. They are in good health. And about 10% of us. Now we get to the hyphenated, which is where I wanted to get before lunch. Yeah, I'll make it. The hyphenated I called hyphenated simply because up until I've named them, they were spelling themselves as Anglo, A-N-G-L-O hyphen, Emergent, M-E-R-G-E-N-T, or Presbo, P-R-E-S-B-Y, Presby, hyphen, M-E-R-G-E-N-T-S, or Metho, which sounds like a bad drug, but M-E-T-H-O-M-E-R, with a hyphen in it. The minute I finally started calling them hyphenated, they dropped the hyphens, every single one of them. It just annoys me to death because I was laying my mark right here. I was going to be remembered for having... And the funny thing is, then they started calling themselves hybrids and decided they didn't like it, so now they're back to calling themselves hyphenated, even though the hyphen is gone now, and it makes no sense at all when you see them call that. They are those, and they are probably... they're probably more Anglo-Emergents than any of the others. There's a sense of humor in these folk. The Pentecostal renewalist folk were for a long, long time calling themselves, AG Emergents, if you were Assemblies of God, or they were calling themselves Co-Emergents or whatever. And now they have all got together and decided, fairly recently, in the last 2 or 3 months, they're going to be Submergents, which I just think is a hoot, just a hoot. I love it. There is huge playfulness. That's the other thing about Emergence that gives routine traditionalists fits, is that they think God's funny as all get out. And not in a disrespectful way. It's just if you can't have fun with your faith, why are you dragging it around? Have fun with it. And so the other one I love is that some of the ladies across all of these spectrums who who are basically emergent and are emergence Christians and want to get together and are priests or pastors in their respective areas, rather than joining their denominational hyphenateds, are now calling themselves the convergents. And so convergents are ladies in the clergy who don't want to stay natally but want to be gender-oriented in there. But anyway, so there's a certain playfulness in all of this. What you've got is folk who are, let's take the Presbymergents, who are absolutely not about to leave the theology of Calvin or the principles of the Westminster Confession of Faith. They're not. They absolutely believe that. But they have all of the sympathies and the understandings of emergence Christianity. They want self-organizing organizations and institutions and congregations within Calvinist tradition. They want the drop-down screen. They want the dancing in their aisles. They don't want the pulpit. They do want, chairs that are sitting around so that we can do whatever we want to do. They are absolutely emergents in every way, except they're not willing to leave the Calvinist principles. They're not willing to leave the doctrine. They, for some reason, and I've not ever understood, the Presbyterian Church of the United States of America was quicker to understand what was happening with its hyphenateds than any other denomination in this country. Right from the get-go, Louisville, their central headquarters, their church headquarters, Louisville has been aware of the Presbymergents and of what they can mean to the church. And they have poured money and respect, and the respect is important, and encouragement into their Presbymergents more than any other group has done. And as a result, the Presbymergents also call themselves loyal radicals. And I think that's a really good term. That's their other name for themselves. And if you Google loyal radicals, you'll get Presbymergents. Their leaders are people like Troy Bronsink or Adam Walker Cleveland or Karen Sloan. They are meeting even as we speak. No, they met up through yesterday, I guess, in Louisville for the first time. Louisville had all of them come at the church's expense into the church headquarters to sit down and begin to talk about what it was they needed and what it was that the church, the institutional church, could give them. Now, there is a man named Ray Anderson who is now emeritus at Fuller Seminary. He just became emeritus. He just retired. Who I think says more about this than anybody else I know. And his metaphor, his book is Emerging Theology for an Emergent Church, or Emergent Theology for an Emerging Church. Anyway, it's in your bibliography. His thesis is that we are indeed reenacting the first century in more ways than we realize, not the least of which is that we have to remember that there was the church in Jerusalem and the church in Antioch, and that much of the tension of the first century was between those two bodies. And the church in Jerusalem, which was obviously inherited church, and he's right, Professor Anderson's right, this is inherited church. Antioch is fresh expressions of church. And Antioch kept coming back to Jerusalem, asking for the imprimatur, asking for some kind of respect, asking for continuity, not asking for money, but asking for those intangibles that gave legitimacy to what it was doing. But as it came back this way, it unfortunately brought with it things like circumcision. Big deal until you call it homosexuality in the 21st century. It came bringing questions of meat sold in the shambles, could it be eaten? It came bringing questions of priests, rabbis who wanted to convert to Christianity, could they be? All of the tensions of the first century were there. Did Jerusalem, by engaging Antioch, get any better off? No. Jerusalem was going to, and Antioch was going to. And Rowan Williams, and I'm told Bishop Catherine also has said the same, Rowan Williams says at this juncture, every time he's talking about it, if we think that we are here to save the Episcopal Church instead of to serve the kingdom of God, may God help us. And he's absolutely right. He is absolutely right. And so is she. And so, the Presbyterian, which is to say, and for what it's worth, When things got tough in Jerusalem, if you will remember, Antioch took up a purse and sent some money home. But don't count on it. It may not happen this go-round, but it did then. So God is doing a new thing. The Presbymergents are the ones who are most visible right now in many ways. Numerically, I suspect they're more Anglo-Emergents. I'm sure that there is probably more energy now in Anglo-Emergents. And Bishop Catherine is deeply aware of this, as Rowan Williams has been for a number of years, which is to say that this year, just about 7 months ago, she appointed 2 new members, full-time members, to the church staff at 815. One is Tom Brackett, and one is Tom Martin. Gary Martin, I'm sorry. And they are there specifically to begin to engage our Anglo-Emergents. They are there to talk about church planting and church extension and what you do as Anglo-Emergents begin to become a real force within American Christianity, carrying with them not a denominational tradition, but a tradition within mainstream Christianity, the Anglican tradition. There is an Anglo-Emergent steering committee. We meet with a number of bishops in attendance. There will be a real presence at GC for those of you for the first time, for those of you who want to see what it looks like. If you want to see what an Anglo-Emergent, who they are, or at least who some of them are, you can go to angloemergent.ning.com. angloemergent.ning.com. And you will see, you can join the conversation there. I think they'd be happy to have you. I'm pleased to say that when that site went up, I never wanted to be a priest. God help me, can't imagine being a priest. But when that website went up, I was surprised to discover that I was canon to the ordinary. When there was no ordinary there, and wrote some of them and said, what does this mean? And the answer came back, well, who knows what a canon to the ordinary does anyway? They generally carry out the trash, and so we think you should carry out the spam. And I thought, okay, all right. It took me a long time to realize I was even an Anglo-Emergent, because when you're watching something, you don't identify with it. I thought I was a stick-in-the-mud Anglican traditionalist, but I suppose I probably am Anglo-Emergent. Anyway, there they are. The steering committee will meet next at St. Gregory of Nyssa in San Francisco in about 3 weeks, and then we will meet back here in Chicago as guests of Jeff Lee. And if you want to see what an Emergence bishop looks like, go to YouTube and look at your bishop. Yes, exactly. There were ripples all over the internet when Jeff Lee, new bishop of Chicago, had the wisdom to go on YouTube and talk about the Episcopal Church. That's what Emergence looks like, or what at least Anglo-Emergence looks like. And having said that, one last thing before we go to prayers. Having said St. Gregory of Nyssa, I think it helps greatly if you see what the examples of it are instead of having me talk forever. St. Gregory of Nyssa was probably one of the first of the Anglo-Emergent churches. It didn't even lay claim to it. Do you know of what I'm speaking? Do you know St. Gregory of Nyssa? All right. It now, as you know, it's 30 years old. About 2.5 years ago, its founding pastors withdrew. That is, Donald Schell is a dear friend, and he and Rick both said, it is time now for this parish to have a new vision. And so they together retired from the pastorate and gave it back, if you will, to the congregation there. It is emergent in that if you go in, you think you're almost in an Orthodox, a Greek Orthodox church, filled with icons, filled with all of the glory of the tradition. The doors are wide open, literally to the streets. They are not in the fanciest part of San Francisco. In fact, they're in the Rust Belt. And most Emergence Christians will choose to habitat within the Rust Belt. They were so outside the box that they were not allowed to be an Episcopal church under diocesan control until, I think Donald told me, 7 years ago, when they were finally admitted to the diocese as a standing Episcopal church. They sit in sort of in choir, that is to say the chairs all move around, but they look at each other like this. To preach there is one of the most disconcerting experiences I've ever had. You sit in an easy chair, and you sit right on might be a chancel, sort of, maybe, in an easy chair, and you look out, and after you've said your piece, then they begin to tell you what was wrong with what you just said. It's a very humbling experience, to say the least. And they will. They will tell you immediately. They are totally open in every way to everything, including the fact that, and I think I conflated it, and it's such a wonderful story, I don't want to inflate it and thereby denigrate it. Sarah Miles, whom you may know, Sarah Miles has just been elected their assistant rector. She's a Jew and was an atheist who has the most dramatic conversion story I ever heard, which is to say that she was in that bad neighborhood of San Francisco one day, saw the wide open doors, and they are wide open. You're a dog and want to do your business, come on in. Nothing's going to stop you, you know. And she saw them and went in, and there was, she said it was such a strange-looking building that she, out of curiosity, she's a reporter by profession, or was, went in. And she said, they're having a service, and not knowing what to do, I just went and did what everybody else did and knew nothing about Christianity. Good Jew, knew nothing about Christianity. And she said, so I opened my mouth, which was what everybody else was doing, and he put that thing in my mouth. And she said, oh my God. So I can't tell her story. I shouldn't try. She tells it better than I do because she doesn't crack up. She said, I didn't understand what tasting Christ was. And she said, I couldn't even get up from the rail. And I didn't go in there because I was in religious need. I went in there because I was a reporter and curious about that building. And she said, the minute that hit my tongue, I was converted right there. She said, I couldn't even take the wine. I just sat there until they helped me away. She's now assistant rector there. She also oversees the food pantry, which is a big part of their mission and a big part of the reason that they are located where they are. And what I don't want to conflate is, I think she told me, it's 9 tons of food that move through there every week. It's either 9 tons or 900,000 or 9,000 pounds. I think it's 9 tons of food that they move through every week. And it is served in what is the same area where they have the Mass. The altar is stripped and it becomes the distribution table. And you come in and you get your food and your box right there. And there is no question. Nothing is holy here except our humanity before God and the way we sacramentalize it. So that's one to look at. They are now, frankly, they're hosting the next meeting of the steering committee. They are now, frankly, saying we're emergent, we're Anglo-emergent, and always have been. The other one that's kind of the poster child is the Church of the Apostles in Seattle, where a woman named Karen Ward is abbess. She is not rector, though she's canonically resident with Greg Rickles in the Diocese of Olympia, and she's very much an Episcopal priest. Don't mess with her. She came up out of Lutheranism, and she knows why she's an Episcopal, thank you very much, and will tell you in a heartbeat, so don't ask unless you've got a lot of time to listen. But she's not a rector. She's an abbess, because attached to the Church of the Apostles is Fremont Abbey. One of the things about Emergence, one of the characteristics is a heavy dose of neo-monasticism. And the Church of the Apostles enacts that, where you've got an abbess running something like an abbey with a whole sliding spectrum of the degree of commitment, whether it's just commitment to each other in prayer, or whether it goes all the way over to common purse and common table, living in community, or for some of her people, and there are 20,000 at least neo-monastic emergent communities in this country now that have been documented. Or whether you go all the way over to common purse, common table, vows of obediency and constancy. Those that are that extreme, you wouldn't know that they are, but those that are that extreme usually take 15% of their individual incomes and live on that as a community and spend the other 85% of combined incomes on works usually in their neighborhood, missional work. So that what we've got here in Emergence Christianity, like all knives, cuts 2 ways. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's got some very, very good things going for it, and some wonderful things that we have lost. And so, prayer. I almost made it. I'm sorry. 5 minutes too long, but that's okay.